you hear me okay? Nuu-chah-nulth AyAyQwaYakSheelth, ahazit sup Nuu-chah-nulth umix stella August non-ix late iris one August. Shukshi-clay, this is Sovereign Credit Haudenosaunee Wendat. My name is J'net AyAyQwaYakSheelth. My name translates one who gives away and still stands tall. I come from a place called Ahazit among the Nuu-chah-nulth on Vancouver Island, where whale hunters come from. So I playfully say, how's it going? Just in case you never heard of Ahazit before. Indigenous people have been forced to learn English, in fact forced to do many things against their will. And I'm not going to force anybody to do anything here today. What I am mindful of as well is that I think Indigenous people are spectacularly generous with everything. My name means one who gives away and still stands tall, and I have a pal in the audience who has a giveaway for you later today because it's a memento, something to remember what you learned here today. So I'm hoping you pick up a few things from a bit of time together. So I did take a moment to do a land acknowledgement, and you have to remember that land acknowledgement is a custom for Indigenous people. If you're from away, like I am, I'm from more than 3,000 kilometers away from home. Can anybody in here identify with that vibe? That you're more than 3,000 kilometers away from home? That's far. And so when I invoke my language, I remind my ancestors, this day belongs to me, wherever I am. And I've been on a hell of a cancer journey this past 18 months, and I'm on the side of treated and cured, but I still value where I'm from. Even though I'm from 3,000 kilometers away, I take the moment to invoke the ancestors whose bones were buried here first. And that's my motivation for doing that, because even our empty chairs here are for our classmates who couldn't make it today, for our buddies we invited that had other commitments, and for our unborn and our ancestors to be in this room with us. So I acknowledge the land and all the ancestors that came before and came after, because Indigenous people have a relationship to time that isn't then and now. That's a binary relationship. Oh, get over it. What does it have to do with now? Well, if you organize your relationship to time as then and now, we don't have to take ownership. We don't have to be accountable. But in Indigenous worldviews, our relationship to time, if I had a Bic, someone flick a Bic for me, by lighting a bit of fire, we're invoking our ancestors and the unborn. And many cultures believe the same thing. Ritual makes our prayers physical, and as you've heard from our other panelists, Indigenous people's history was disrupted, and we weren't allowed to pass that knowledge on. We live in a colonized country that's carved up. The last slide is a living culture. If you go like this, that's how you say turtle in sign language. We're on a living, life-giving planet. And we don't have ownership over that planet because land ownership and title is a social construct. It's a Western social construct. It's made up. It holds relationships together because it's based on white patriarchal values. So sociologists tell us there are 5 major institutions that make up every society. And when European culture came here, they completely ignored the societies that existed here, that we all had something. If we had time and it was more of a lecture scene, I'd ask you to call out, but I forgot my hearing aids. So these are the 5 major societies, institutions that make up every society. Every society needs a land base, and many cultures, especially Western cultures, have taken the land. Do your research and find out what the doctrine of discovery means. In the name of the Almighty God, Pope, one of the popes, I think it was I can't remember, like 1500 Pope. Anyway, 1400 Pope. Anyway, one of the popes said, if you go looking for land and you don't find any Christians, you can claim it in the name of God. Doctrine of discovery. Do your research. Know your history. Know how these Western systems have historically and systemically screwed over Indigenous peoples, the world afar. If you're not from this ancestral land, you're probably from somewhere that was probably dominated by imperial rule in some way, and you end up squatting over here. And that's okay, because my father's white, right? So it worked out for me. Right? The explorers came and they stayed. I'm okay with that, and I've had to make peace with that. Because I live in a world where honestly I'm not white enough, and I'm also in a world where I am not native enough either. So what came of this social institutions is that we live in a country where religion went into cahoots with government to create an education system to steal the children, to steal the land and resources. You watch Hunger Games?
Yeah.
It's the colonial project turned on itself. Instead of screwing over Indigenous people, you want to kill a culture, take away the babies. Anybody here watch The Fifth Wave on Netflix lately? Oh my God, echo. Because if you're going to kill a culture, you take the babies away. If you're going to demasculate the men, rape their women. If you're going to take women's power away, take their babies away. Take their rights away. We have this cartoon that says they're building a wall because there's too many of us who enter illegally and won't learn their language or assimilate their culture. Well, because you're university students at this level of debt, when you're investing in your education the way you are, you need to look at these kind of narratives with a critical lens. Because who's really keeping people out in this country? Because if Indigenous people had this ethic, you all wouldn't be here. We actually saved your ancestors from dying of scurvy, for crying out loud. We helped you survive and thrive on this land, and we get told we're holding you back. So you have to really question this kind of humor. And I'm not going to read this, but it's worth knowing your history. We have a potlatch ban in this country. For nearly 76 years, our art, our language, our culture, all the accoutrements for ceremony, our everyday outfits, our where we carried our babies in our cradle boards and our moss bags, that was all outlawed. Wearing this skirt would have been a criminal act in that 76-year period. And it turns out that we need to know our history. Because I learned on Star Trek, what we deny, we're condemned to relive. And I think we really need to remember that. And while I have a heartbeat, I have creative control over what I produce. Instead of the fashion industry replicating my art badly, work with me, you can make the pretty outfit, I'll make the art. Because that's part of my heartbeat. I'm related to that art. I have permission to recreate that art because it's my intellectual property, not yours. And while I have a heartbeat and I've overcome cancer and I've earned this heartbeat, I have control over my intellectual property. It's a spectacular way of crossing generations, crossing cultures. It has meaning. Even the jewelry I wear, the tree of life, it reminds me, apparently when you give birth and you turn your placenta, apparently, my midwife told me that we birth our placenta inside out. For those of you that don't know this, someone could have told me, but after you give birth to a baby, you have to give a couple extra pushes. You think it's over, it's not. A couple more pushes later, the afterbirth comes out. And midwives will hold up that afterbirth and say, that's the tree of life. And the patch that sticks to the wall of the uterus looks like this. And the umbilical cord is the root system of that. And I imagine 3 babies later, each of them must have been different. Being a hippie and an artist, I made a print of my daughter's placenta. Because it's a relationship I have with my daughter, and it's a relationship I have with art. And if we had time, we would watch a video, and again, it's your due diligence to do research. Watch the OAC film. Ontario Arts Council has a spectacular film on how to work with Indigenous artists. And one of my mentors, Lee Miracle, says loud and clear, when Western culture has an overblown sense of entitlement, all they can do is take. And I have my own opinion that Indigenous artists' art gets replicated badly on the runway, largely, in my humble opinion, because the Western culture doesn't have imagination of its own. It's come from so far away, it's been so far removed from its knickers and bonnets that they can't think of anything else. And even in time, fashion repeats on itself because they have no imagination to do anything other than bell bottoms, A-line skirts, shoulder pads. Love the shoulder pads. But what we've got to work with is acknowledging that Indigenous art tells a story. It holds us in relationship with what we're wearing. If I work at the Royal Ontario Museum and I can dress up every day because I can, but if I have a meeting where I need to be objective, I wear eagle. If I have a meeting where I need to show a little extra kindness, I'll go out of my way and wear a hummingbird. Our art isn't random. It has meaning. It has relationship. So these were just some humble words I put up there. And again, it's your due diligence to look at what is the difference between appropriation and appreciation. And this is just a humble way to stimulate that conversation beyond today. So I have many things. I'm an artist. I'm a textile weaver. I wore one of my belts today. I'm an art educator. I develop curriculum. I'm a facilitator. I have a career ambition to thaw out colonized minds and change the conversation about who Indigenous people are and who we're becoming. How many distinct nations do you think there are in this beautiful country from coast to coast to coast? I can't hear you without my hearing aids. At least 65. At least 65 distinct nations. I'm not just a good-looking Indigenous woman, I'm from somewhere. These aren't just good-looking Indigenous people either, they're from somewhere. I said that to my Italian friend. I said, you're not Italian, are you? You're from somewhere in Italy. You speak a certain dialect, you eat certain, oh, I get it. So in time, it's important to change those conversations. Someone asked me, what kind of Indian are you? And I smiled and said, it might be more respectful to ask me what nation I'm from. But it is a lot of work on our end to always correct people. And so if you can, find people from the mainstream culture that can help be part of that conversation, it's vital. My good friend that's from Italy always used to introduce me. This is my Indian friend, Jeanette. And it took one of her friends to finally say, you can't call her that. But I love my friend enough to let her thaw out when she was ready. And it had to be her friend, her white friend, that had to correct her. So if you don't know what to call somebody, take a moment to say, what would you prefer to be called? And if you can't say it, practice. Practice. I mean, not everybody can say my last name, but when I legally changed it because CBC wouldn't say it on the radio show, I decolonized myself and indigenized my name forever. And when my 5-year-old son could say it, it's possible. It's possible. So if you can be a part of changing the conversation, take ownership of that and recognize that while Indigenous people have a heartbeat, we have intellectual and cultural property rights to our art.